California. I want to talk about the coming microchip implant, and that's the title of a brand new book I have out called Are You Ready for the Microchip? And I've been doing extensive research on the topic of the implant for many years. And in the last year or two, I began to look at very intensive research, some of it that is not readily available to the public, but it's documented research. Some of it is scientific literature, some of it is from Senate reports, etc., etc. And the microchip implant is not, it's here. There was a corporation called Microchip Corporation, which was the leading manufacturer of microchip implants with RFID chips. And they've sold quite a few of them to animals, to people in the Mexican government, to celebrities, to babies. They've sold quite a few of these. Now, when the healthcare stimulus package was passed for the healthcare bill, Microchip very cleverly changed their name to Positive ID, and it packaged itself as more of a medical corporation. Now, if you look in the documents of the healthcare bill, which is like this thick, of which, by the way, none of our elected representatives read it before they signed it, because Nancy Pelosi said in a quite non-constitutional way, you don't get to read it, we the people, until after you sign it. How ludicrous. Can you imagine signing any contract before you read the fine print? Well, in pages 1001 to 1005 in the healthcare bill, and you can read it for yourself, I have it copied in my book, there is language that is admittedly vague legally. So it's vague, but it talks about what appears to be a microchip implant and the authorization for hospitals and the healthcare program to use microchip implants. Now, they don't use the word microchip implants, but many have referred to it as med chips. Well, of course, if you have a med chip or a microchip medical implant put in you, it's a stone's throw from a microchip. But here's the key thing. There are many leading constitutional attorneys who have interpreted the language in the healthcare bill to mean that there is now legal authorization, in fact, to make it mandatory for American citizens, and if they hit their target date, they may not hit their target date, for every baby born in the United States of America by 2013, they would have to receive a mandatory microchip implant shortly after birth, and of course all U.S. citizens would. Now, I don't know if they'll achieve the target date. Again, the language is vague, but there is a considerable number of constitutional attorneys who believe that the legal language provides legislation for a law enacting a microchip implant. And some of these legal authorities are among the ACLU, as well as more conservative legal groups. So you have the ACLU on one hand, and you have conservative groups on the other hand, being very concerned about this surveillance society. Others, of course, dismiss it in its entirety. But I suggest that you read it, because the language is quite revealing. And it appears, in my opinion, and I'm not a legal expert, I'm basing my opinion on the opinions of legal experts, that it makes a provision for a microchip implant. But even if that was not the case, which I don't think it is, I think it is the case, even if that was not the case, they are pushing for legislation very aggressively. They've done this all the way through the Bush administration to make it mandatory to have a national ID card. But and two of the senators, and it's always a Republican and a Democrat who are pushing, because the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are controlled by the same invisible government, if you will. The difference between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party is the difference between Coca-Cola and Pepsi. It's practically not different at all. And the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are controlled by the same invisible power structure which has controlled our nation since 1914, when the Federal Reserve Act was passed and the international bankers took control, illegally by the way, of the U.S. monetary supply. And it is the Federal Reserve and the international banking families that they represent that actually controls the United States of America. It is no longer we the people. That's been that way for many years. So the game plan, what they want to do is make it mandatory for you to carry and I delve into this in quite a great deal of more detail in my book, Are You Ready for the Microchip? But the goal, and they're trying to pass it very quickly, is to make it mandatory for you to have a national ID. But this national ID will be called a National Biometric Identification Card. So it's not going to be just a piece of plastic. Your ID will have embedded in it a biometric RFID chip that transmits all kinds of information about yourself to a passing car, if somebody has a device, to somebody in a store, to a bank, to an unmarked car outside of your house. You are constantly transmitting information via the RFID chip built into your national ID card. So it not only does it give your identification and your social security number, but it will have your medical records, your political affiliation. Do you suffer from depression? A whole litany of things. What is your religion? And probably all kinds of data that you would think, well, why would they ask for this? Now, I uncover this in Are You Ready for the Microchip in great detail. And I suggest that you read it because it uncovers the truth. I'm Paul McGuire.